But let's start with Purdue right away. Again, it's an anticipatory day in the state of Indiana. Purdue takes on Houston in the Sweet 16 at 10:09 p.m. Eastern on TBS. It's the fourth-seeded Purdue Boilermakers and the top-seeded Houston Cougars in the Midwest region. They will play at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Now, both of these teams have been to Final Fours in the last few years, right? Of course, Purdue went to the national championship just last season. Kelvin Sampson, also a Final Four caliber coach. Matt Painter, a championship contending coach. We know he obviously hasn't done it yet, but he's gotten very close. And potentially, if they get past Houston, Purdue could be in contention to do something similar and potentially get over the hump this season themselves. Now, let's talk about Purdue first. Obviously, that's who we're primarily concerned with this being an Indiana show. They took care of High Point in the first round, 75-63, and then they raced past McNeese, 76-62 in the second round. Now, that's two similar score lines against two very similar opponents. You have these, low major teams, right? These are one bid leagues, and these teams raced through them. They worked through them with ease, get through their tournaments, win the conference tournament. It's a 13 seed and it's a 12 seed. It's two great teams with stellar records coming out of small conferences, and Purdue as the superior program, as the team with superior resources, superior athletes, they took care of both of them, doused those dreams, ended those Cinderella runs if they existed right away before the second weekend even began. And that's where sort of the switch up comes in to me, right? Because you go from playing High Point and McNeese, and much respect to those programs, much respect to Will Wade especially. McNeese certainly had a lot of hype surrounding it heading into the tournament. I picked McNeese to make the Sweet 16. I was wrong. I underestimated Purdue, right? And Purdue took care of both of those teams very quickly. And now you go from those low major programs in High Point and McNeese to Houston, to the one seed in the region, to a 32-4 team that just ran through the Big 12 regular season and the tournament. Absolutely a championship contending team. I actually picked Houston in my bracket to win the national championship. That's how high I am personally on Houston. It is not lost on me how great Houston is, how great LJ Cryer is, how great Kelvin Sampson is, how great this Houston program has been under Kelvin Sampson. Houston is awesome. And the switch up from going to High Point and McNeese to now playing against Houston is massive. And fortunately, Purdue sort of has a week to figure it out, right? They played, I guess I don't actually recall. I believe they played Saturday, and now they're playing Friday. So they'll have 6 days in between the first weekend and the second weekend to prepare for Houston. But this is a big switch up, going from low major programs to one of the highest major programs in the country, especially this year. So let's look at Houston, right? This team is 32-4. They were Big 12 regular season and tournament champions. Again, they raced through that conference with ease, similar to what High Point and McNeese did, but the difference is Houston's in the Big 12, right? This is a program that just moved into the Big 12 and has had massive success while there. Of course, they win the league this season. They're led by LJ Cryer. He's a senior guard. He's been around for a while. Kelvin Sampson has really lived through LJ Cryer, I suppose, really lived off of LJ Cryer. I am interested to see, on a side note, where Kelvin Sampson and the Houston sort of goes without LJ Cryer. But for now, they have LJ Cryer, and for now, he's awesome. Again, senior guard, 15.6 points per game this season. He shoots at over 40% from the field, right? He had 30 against Gonzaga. The last two times they've played ranked caliber teams, right? Of course, Gonzaga, awesome team, top 10 in KenPom. They played BYU a couple weeks ago. In the tournament, they were number 17 in the AP poll that time. LJ Cryer had 20 in that game. So Cryer's a guy that frequently can really take over, and he absolutely can score the basketball, and it doesn't really matter against who, right? BYU's awesome. They're in the Sweet 16. Gonzaga's awesome. They just lost to Houston in the second round as an 8 seed. LJ Cryer is their best player, and that sort of parlays into their biggest strength, which is the backcourt. LJ Cryer and friends, and he's not the only one, but LJ Cryer and friends, number one 3-point percentage shooting team in the country. There is nobody better in college basketball than Houston at shooting the 3-point. They're just under 40% at that mark on the year, which is insane. To be consistently shooting it doesn't matter how many shots you take, to be consistently shooting just under 40% from three over the course of the whole season. That is unbelievable. That's what LJ Cryer and this Houston backcourt has been doing. So right away, that's the number one issue, right? Houston shoots the three better than anybody else. That's the number one thing you're going to have to take away if you're Purdue. But on the flip side, Houston doesn't actually score that much. You would think that the best three-point percentage shooting team in the country would be putting points up on the board all day long. They don't, right? They're in the 200s in points per game, but it's because they don't need to, because they're, again, number one in the country in opponents' points per game. They keep teams to about 58, certainly under 60 points per game. And again, this is Houston in the Big 12. The Big 12 is considerably down this year. It's typically considered to be the best league in the country. Now the SEC is, of course, taking that mark. The Big 10's still great. The Big East has some firepower as well. So it's a down Big 12, but still, Houston is game after game against power conference opponents, keeping them to roughly under 60 points. That is incredible. So Houston, the number one team in the country at opponents post per game, defensively, right? They're keeping teams scoring fewer than they normally would, and they're number one in the country in three-point shooting percentage. So that's how they win, right? It's great perimeter defense, and it's great shooting on the other end, and taking care of the basketball in transition is really what allows those two strengths to flow together and function together. So if they're shooting well, it's effectively game over against anybody in the country, right? Because Houston's going to make it very difficult for opposing teams to score, and if they're shooting the three well, if they're hitting their shots, the game is effectively over against, again, most teams in the country. If they're not, then you start to have a chance. If Houston's missing, then you start to have an opportunity on the other end to maybe outpace them over the course of the game or just hang in there and then steal it at the very end, right? Houston's awesome. I want to be very clear. Houston is fantastic. I think they're going to win. At least I thought going into the tournament, I thought they were going to win the national championship. I don't believe that anybody understands just how good Houston is. I think they're going to prove it. I think this is their opportunity to show it in this game against Purdue. Most years there's a game between a 1 seed and a 4 seed that's just a complete blowout. And it's really the wake-up call where you realize that this isn't fun and games anymore. This isn't the Cinderella tournament that we enjoyed on the first weekend. This is the rest of the way, right? This is 1 seeds against 1 seeds, 1s and 2s. Every game the rest of the way, you're playing a top 10, top 15, certainly, of course, top 16 team in the country. You're playing top 10 and top 5 opponents game after game, sometimes on effectively back-to-back days, right, every other day. It's a different world over here in the second weekend, and it's a totally different world as well in the Final Four. So a lot of times we see, teams like St. Peter's make the Elite Eight and then just get absolutely annihilated by North Carolina, right? Or we see 1 seeds and 4 seeds where even if it's between two power opponents, two power 5, power 4, power 6, whatever you want to call it, teams, one of them, the 1 seed, the superior, completely dominates the other. And that's sort of what I thought could happen to Purdue. I thought Purdue was the 4 seed that walks into a 1 seed in the Sweet 16 and just gets absolutely dominated. That could happen here. Houston is that team that would be able to absolutely shut the lights off on somebody like Purdue or somebody like Michigan, right? Somebody like Maryland. And again, much respect to all those teams. I think they're great. I think Maryland has a chance to win. Michigan has a chance to win. I don't think they will. Purdue has a chance to win. I'll tell you why. But Houston is awesome, championship contender. They shoot the three well, and they play great perimeter defense. That's how they win. Their weakness is the front court, right? They don't have stellar rebounding. Now, the issue is Purdue doesn't either. They're very poor on the defensive end in the front court, in my opinion, relative to other 1 seeds and 2 seeds, right? So Trey Kaufman-Renn should be able to score. And that's where the offensive focus should be, is attacking the basket. It's attacking the blocks. It's attacking the front court. Crashing the glass is what I called it. I don't particularly trust Fletcher Loyer and the rest of the young guards for Purdue to shoot well versus this defense. Braden Smith is going to be game planned against, right? And if Braden Smith is limited, and we've seen this time and time again, right? Purdue was limited against IU, and there was really no one else to backfill that production, and IU ended up winning that second game against Purdue. And many of the other losses that Purdue has were when Braden Smith was taken out of the equation. And it's not really, at the end of the day, his fault. He can't be asked to do everything, especially when an opponent is game planning specifically for him. And I think that LJ Cryer and Braden Smith are kind of going to single one another out, and it's going to be, okay, these two are playing an individual game, and the supporting cast are playing their own game. Braden Smith and LJ Cryer might just cancel one another out, or somebody's going to win that advantage, and that very well might be the advantage in the entire game for the entire team. The front court, though, is the issue for me. If Braden Smith can get downhill, fantastic. If the ball can be forced into Trakoff and Wren down low, I think that's where most of the magic is going to happen offensively for Purdue. If the magic happens offensively for Purdue, and defensively, it's in the backcourt. You have to restrict the perimeter. You're going to have to accept the gambit and play the way Houston wants to play. If they don't want to shoot, right, if they want to keep Purdue from shooting the basketball effectively, you're going to have to do the best to do the same against them, because if they have open shots, Houston's winning the game. If Houston has open threes, they're going to hit them, and they're going to take big leads, and they're going to start well early on, and then before you know it, you're down by 8 with 12 minutes left in the second half, and it's been that way the entire game, and there's nothing that you really, it doesn't feel like there's much that you would be able to do. So that's why I think that Purdue absolutely is going to have to focus on the perimeter. I'm okay if Houston beats them down low, right? If Houston can do what Purdue's trying to do and force the ball down low and get downhill and get past the backcourt guys right away at the top of the key, that's fine. But you cannot allow Houston to win the typical way. You cannot allow Houston to win the way they normally do, which is by hitting open shots, taking open threes, creating space around the perimeter, and knocking down the shots that most teams would allow them to take. Cannot do that in this game, right? On the defensive side of the basketball, you're taking away the perimeter as much as you possibly can. You're restricting the perimeter as much as you possibly can. Restrict the space. There's no open shots. Make them work for their success. Make them force their way downhill. Make them expend that energy. No open shots for Houston. That's Purdue's key defensively, which is much more difficult, much more easily said than done, I should say. Now, on the offensive side, again, it's focusing on the front court. I want to see Purdue play a similar style of offensive basketball as they have been in the last couple of years, where you're essentially forcing the ball to your anchor, Zach Edey. The offense flowed through Zach Edey. It hasn't been that way this season because they don't have Zach Edey anymore, obviously, and Trey Government isn't quite the same offensive presence, so there's a little bit more creative guard play between Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Primarily Braden Smith, who's emerged as an awesome guard and arguably one of the best in the country, certainly one of the best in the country, arguably the best. So now this is sort of the situation where Purdue kind of has to revert to what they know, and it's getting the ball inside to Trakoff and Wren. It's getting the ball inside to Will Berg, Caleb First, whoever's going to be down there. I want to see great individual backcourt defense so that we can allow there to be a larger size presence in the front court on the other end of the floor, so that the Purdue can have the opportunity to get the ball inside to Trakoff and Wren. Purdue can have the opportunity to get the ball inside to First or Berg, whoever it is. That's where I think the points are going to go on the board for Purdue. For Purdue, most of the time is in between the blocks, in the lane, down low. If Braden Smith can get downhill, great. If he can't, then the pressure's really gonna be on Trakoff and Wren and the rest of those bigs down there to make the magic happen down low. Now, but really the key for me is not allowing Houston to take an early lead by hitting some open threes. It's lockdown, restrictive perimeter defense the whole way through. I don't know if this version of Purdue is going to be capable of fully slowing that down enough to outpace the Cougars. I think Houston's going to win because it's an Indiana show and because I love Purdue and I love Braden Smith and I love this Matt Painter. I love this team. I'll pick Purdue to cover the 8 points. But I think Houston's going to win this game, and I think it's going to be because, again, LJ Cryer is inevitable, and as much as Braden Smith is inevitable, Houston can shoot the three better than I think Houston could shoot better than Purdue can, undeniably, right? If you take LJ Cryer out of the game, and if you take Braden Smith out of the game, if they both counteract each other, it's equal production, right? The plus minus is even. Then I think that we're in a situation where Houston supporting cast is going to be able to shoot better than Purdue supporting cast. And at the end of the day, I think that's what it's going to come down to. Houston still has a strong front court. It's their weakness relative to other 1 and 2 seeds, but Purdue's a 4 seed, right? And I think that that's kind of going to be exemplified. I think that Purdue's going to sort of realize that, okay, we were at this level last year, but we're not quite at this level this year. And unfortunately, Houston, in my opinion, is going to shoot better than Purdue in the backcourt. I think they're going to hold their ground just enough in the front court. I have Houston knocking off Purdue. But the keys for Purdue, right? Perimeter defense, restrict the perimeter out of the gate, and on the other end of the floor, force the ball inside. Work the front court, attack the blocks, attack the rim. That's how Purdue has an opportunity to win this basketball game. Also, it's important to note, I just want to add this, Purdue's biggest weakness has been rim protection the entire time. So Houston, their biggest strength is backcourt and three-point shooting, and Purdue's biggest weakness is downhill defense, right, at the rim. So Houston's going to have multiple ways to dissect this Purdue defense, and I think they're going to outpace Purdue. They'll cover the 8, or Purdue will cover the 8, but Houston's going to win this game. They'll advance the Elite 8 as a 1 seed.